Going. Awesome. Come on. All right, everybody, welcome back to the program. My name is Dr. Dan. I am a pharmacist turned obesity expert. I'm very excited about tonight's presentation. I always love kind of doing this one to kick off the new year, if you will, to give you some perspective, some ideas, considering we're all somewhat thinking about the various New Year's resolutions and that sort of thing. So it's a good time for reflection and taking part and really kind of digging a little bit deeper into what it is that we're looking to do. So through tonight's presentation, I'm hoping to kind of provide you a good overview on some of really the basics. If you've been following me for a while, some of it's going to be familiar, some of it's going to possibly be new, and kind of just some new ideas, incorporations, and thoughts and stuff like that that I have, and also looking at what some of the newer research and stuff like that is pulling together. There might be a few points where you might have questions and stuff like that. Please save them all to the end, and we will have a quick Q&A session towards the end of the presentation here. And yeah, so let's get the ball rolling here. I'll share my screen. All righty, so how to manage your weight in the new year and really create lasting changes. So one of my big things that I always talk about is that managing our weight needs to be something that's sustainable for us. If we're not able to sustain it, if we're not able to continue it long term, ultimately we're going to gain the weight back. And this is very much a reality for many individuals who have spent their lives struggling with their weight. So, whoops. Here is my presenter disclosures. Always like to kind of highlight these and bring these out just so you guys are aware of any kind of potential biases and that sort of thing that I have. Obviously, I am a human being and I'm going to have certain biases and stuff, but these are particular companies and sort of things that I'm affiliated with and various funding for projects and stuff that I work on and partake in. Thankfully, some of this list is getting a little bit smaller these days, although things might be getting a little bit, might be adding a few things in the near future here, so stay tuned. Of course, as you kind of saw, this event is being recorded, not only so that you can come back to it. There's probably going to be a lot of information tonight. I really tried to keep it somewhat concise and highlight some main points, but I mean, I could speak about this stuff for hours and hours and hours on end. So this event is being recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube there afterwards. Any kind of identifying information will be removed prior to it going and being uploaded or used in social media posts and that sort of thing. So here's a brief overview of the learning objectives. Understand the two brains. I'm sure many of you have heard me talk about that. Explore how we can keep the primal brain happy and the modern brain engaged. And then we're going to review some of the basic principles just around weight management and what we need to be thinking about as you maybe make a plan or start to move towards your healthier and happier lifestyle in general. So let's first have a bit of an acknowledgement here. I always talk about how losing weight is challenging, but that's the easy part. That's the part that most people can do and have done it successfully many times. But it's the maintaining the weight loss that really is the hard part. It is the part that is the struggle. It is the part that is going to be the challenge of keeping the weight off for the long term and preventing that weight regain. For a quick overview here, obesity management and weight management, what we know is that obesity is now characterized as a chronic disease. There are a multitude of factors that go into how our bodies gain weight, lose weight, the speed at which it does all of these things, et cetera, et cetera. But we finally have gotten a full definition and recognition as a chronic disease. And this has really opened up the door in terms of funding, research, and the advancement of how we can better manage and figure out what's the best course of actions in managing your weight and managing your health. The big question always is, though, should everyone lose weight? And it really depends, right? For sure, individuals that have visceral fat, and this is the fat that's around our organs. So if someone says, or a doctor says, maybe you have fatty liver, or there's fat around other parts of your inner organs and stuff like that, this fat is definitely more concerning. The big reason being is that what we know about our fat tissue is we thought it was inert and it just literally just stored fat and nothing else. But what we know now is our fat actually releases a number of chemicals and hormones and that sort of thing. And some of these hormones and chemicals can cause some inflammation. And so when they're in close proximity to our various organs, those chemicals are reaching those organs, those other cells, and could potentially cause some damage. And so this can lead to things like increasing our risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, that sort of thing. The subcutaneous fat, so the fat that's on the outer layers, it's outside of our muscles, it's kind of more that surface layer level of fat, is less of a concern just because it doesn't have that proximity to the organs. So it's not as much of a concern. But again, generally what ends up happening if we get too much of the subcutaneous fat, eventually it's going to become visceral fat and collect around our organs and can definitely become more problematic. Many people might say, think of, the apple versus pear shape. So if you have more weight around your abdomen, that's likely there's more weight in being carried in your visceral organs, around your organs and that sort of thing. The pear shape is going to be more of carrying the weight around your buttocks and that sort of thing. And so that has been associated with a lower risk of complications and such. So the benefits of weight loss, well, technically not everyone needs to or nor should they lose weight. And what we have is a group of individuals that are what we would consider metabolically healthy. So they might have excess fat tissue and have no comorbid complications. There's nothing wrong. There's no high blood pressure, no cholesterol issues, that sort of thing. So they're looking pretty good. And the question is should they even bother losing weight? Is there a reason for them to lose weight? And right now it's kind of a bit of a gray area, but what we're kind of starting to tease out is that it might be a matter of when versus if. So what I mean by that is that your body seems to be able to compensate for a period of time when we do have excess fat tissue, but over time that might become problematic because the body can only compensate for so long in terms of keeping off health problems, and eventually it might lead to complications down the road. Now, still again, is it going to happen to everybody? No. So not everybody necessarily needs to lose weight, but it is something to kind of be thinking about. And again, depending on where that fat is on your body, if it's the visceral fat, you're going to get a lot more potential benefit in that regard. So that's the couple of things to kind of think about before we really go down on this road here. Now, as well, another point that I want to bring up here is that it's often hard to distinguish, what benefits came from losing weight and what benefits came from just engaging in healthier behaviors. So becoming more active, eating more veggies, eating more health foods, those sorts of things. We have a plethora of evidence to show that those alone can have great, great health benefits. And so is it the weight loss itself, or is it that you've engaged in these other behaviors and stuff like that? Again, it's tough to say. And the two tend to go hand in hand, and it's likely a combination of them both. But certainly weight loss isn't the end all be all for a lot of things. Cholesterol is kind of a good example of where you could lose a significant amount of weight. Your cholesterol levels likely won't change because of weight loss alone. It's likely going to be the dietary change of reducing your saturated fat intake and increasing your unsaturated fat intake. So real life though, intentional weight loss, anytime we decide we're going to embark on that, it has risks. There is very much a chance of weight regain. Kind of the common joke that we have is that the best way to gain 5 pounds is to lose 20. Almost can be guaranteed that many people will ultimately gain the weight back. And that's based on kind of the studies that we have up to this point on, unsustainable diets and patterns and that sort of thing. So we'll get into that a little bit later here. As well, there of course is the chance of developing disordered eating, or before you even begin on a weight management or weight loss journey, there might already be a disordered eating pattern that's going on there. So we always want to be thinking about health is our number one priority. We absolutely, you're allowed to lose weight. You're allowed to look a certain way, to be and do whatever the hell it is you want to do. You're allowed to do all of those things. But you always want to keep in mind your health is being the number one priority. And if the goals that you're aiming for of, a certain number on the scale or what have you, if it's causing more harm, not only from a physical, but a mental health, psychological, that sort of thing, then it's really time to reevaluate what it is that we're actually striving for and aiming to do and that sort of thing. Finally, here, there is no best approach to this. So it doesn't matter the diet that you do, they're all going to do the same thing and put you in a calorie deficit. What fundamentally is the most important is finding what ultimately works for you and you alone, not your friend Karen, not Susan. What is going to actually work for you? So before we start anything, we need to understand why we're going to do it. And the reason being is that changing your behaviors, changing your patterns, putting yourself in a calorie deficit, exercising more, what have you, that's all going to involve some degree of suffering. And if we don't have a deep enough reason as to why we're wanting to embark on this change, it's going to be pretty easy to say, screw it, I don't want to do it anymore. This really sucks. Exercise can be tough. Calorie deficit can be tough. So why are we going to embark on this? Why is it important for us to do it? And so this gets us to take a little bit of a deeper look at, is it to be healthier? Why is it important to you? And really digging out what are the things that are really most important to you in your life? What is your future going to look like? What is your future going to feel like? Is it going to be spending time with your kids? Is it going to be spending or feeling joy, having less pain, fewer medications, more energy, travel, retirement? The list goes on and on and on. Now, one way to kind of tease out and really pull out this reason why, and before you even embark on anything, is creating what's called a destination postcard. Now, we've all probably received a destination postcard at some point from a friend who is traveling, or we've sent one to a friend back home or whatever. But this is looking at kind of a destination postcard in the future. So writing a letter back to yourself as to what you foresee your future being. And I mean, get as detailed as you possibly can. There's no limits as to what it can be for you. And it's going to be, what are you doing? What are you seeing, smelling, feeling, touching, all those sorts of things? And what is it, the feelings that you're having? What are the successes that you've had? Talking and bringing these all about and kind of writing them from the future to yourself now really helps us to kind of get an idea of what the future, what the journey that is that we want to go on. Where do we eventually want to try and end up? Now, are you going to nail it and get exactly to whatever you envision for the future? No, of course not. There's always going to be changes and things that come up and various other aspects of life and whatnot. But it's still giving us a direction, a direction that we can move towards versus just kind of destinations, which would be things like a number on the scale or a certain shirt size or whatever. Those are destinations along the journey. They're stop off points where we'll get off for a little while, but we want to continue on this journey of continuous improvement and working towards the happiest and healthiest life we possibly can. And that's going to involve being involved with and working towards the things that are really important to us. So if having less medications is important to you, well, that's going to be an ongoing and continuous thing that you work on. You're going to continually need to watch what you're eating, being active, and that sort of thing in order to mitigate and hopefully reduce the number of medications that you ultimately need. It's not something you just one day say, all right, that's it, I'm done, and stop it altogether. So this is kind of a brief overview. I do go into this a lot more detail on my other channels and stuff like that, but this should kind of give you a good starting point to just refocus, figure out what is that deeper reason why it is you're doing what you're doing, and to kind of help you and serve it as a reminder to keep moving in the direction that you ultimately want to go. All right, so now we're kind of looking at what are we dealing with in terms of our weight? What are the challenges that we have to overcome? Now, what this is the obesity, I can't remember, obesity graph or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but this shows all of the various components that ultimately make up our weight, that are going to affect our weight. All these tiny little boxes up in here, these are all individual factors that need to be taken into account. And as you can see, they're kind of broken up into their various main components, right? We have activity environment, we have our individual activity, we have biology, so that's all your genetics, physiology, and that sort of thing. Food consumption, what is the food that you're eating and consuming? Food production, it is $1 billion industry to try and get you to eat as much food as possible and make food taste as delicious as possible. Societal influences, so that's going to be things like cultural aspects of things. We just had the holiday, so I bet you just about everybody here was gathered around a table with family. Individual psychology, do you have an all or nothing mentality? The list is absolutely endless of the different things that can potentially influence our own individual weight and how quickly we're able to lose weight, gain weight, and that sort of thing. So we're dealing with a lot here. And a lot of these things, as kind of pointed out here, we really can't do much about, right? Some of them, our environment, we can maybe modify and change, but depending on where you're at in your life, what you've got going on, the stressors that you have, many of these things are not going to be able to be changed. Same thing with medical conditions and medications. Some medical conditions can make you more prone to gaining weight. Some medications that are the best options for treating your medical condition can definitely lead to weight gain as well. So there's so many different things that are potentially there and can play a role. So we're not going to so much focus on this because a lot of the stuff we can't do anything about. We're going to talk about what we can deal with. And that is the two brains. Now, I'm sure many of you have kind of heard me talk about this, or have, again, depending on how closely you've worked with me. The two brains is, well, it's one of my favorite things to really talk about. I find the psychology of the brain very, very fascinating and very, very cool. So first up here, we've got the primal brain. So some people might call this the lizard brain, the hind brain. It's essentially the part of our brain that developed many millennia ago. And really its sole function is to keep you alive. It doesn't matter how it does that. If you go into a coma and your lungs and heart are you're still breathing and your heart is still beating, that is the part of your brain. The primal brain is ultimately keeping those systems going. They're running them automatically to keep them active and doing what they need to do. Same thing. It's also driven very much by reward. So by pleasure, reward, it's constantly seeking those out, and it wants to avoid pain at all costs. So it's very much a hedonist. It responds in a stimulus response behavior. Now, what I mean by that is that, if you're cold, it's going to tell you, go put on a jacket. If you're hungry, it's going to tell you to go eat some food. It doesn't matter if, the food is a Big Mac or what have you, or for a plate of broccoli, it's going to tell you to go and get that food. It's much going to prefer the Big Mac and having that, but it's presently focused as well. So it's not thinking about, well, if I have a Big Mac every day for the next 20 years, is that going to cause a heart attack? It just doesn't care whatsoever. It just wants to get food and calories because it detects that the body needs nutrients. So whatever nutrients it can get, it's going to make it happen. Same thing if you're cold and it tells you to go turn up the thermostat. Well, the body's getting warmed up right now, which is exactly what it wanted. It doesn't care if you get a massive gas bill at the end of the month. It's not its problem. It's just focused on the present right now and keeping the being alive. Next, we have the modern brain. So this is the part of our brain that kind of separates us from the animals. It allows us to be creative, problem solve, organize, have developed the society that we have and the various things that people partake in, and all the cool things that really come out of that. It also gives us the ability to have abstract thoughts, existential crises, that sort of thing. So all the bad things as well that kind of come with that. And it's also focused on goal-directed behavior, which I'll get into here in a second. So the primal brain, really, again, this is where the animals, this is the piece that they have. And if you think about animals, they don't have hobbies. They don't contemplate their existence. Like, they just exist. They just be, right? Your dog is pumped and excited for you to be home. Doesn't matter how long you've been gone. They are over the moon excited about it, right? And dogs don't necessarily have hobbies. They're not going out and, working in the wood shop for kicks, for shits and giggles by any means. They just don't have those. They just are more present in the now and are very much focused on that stimulus and response, excuse me. So they know when a treat is coming. They know if they do good, they get a treat. If they do bad, there's going to be some kind of response that comes to it. So that's kind of the best way to think about the primal brain in that regard. The modern brain, on the other hand, really has that ability to think about our own death, have thoughts about our thoughts, causes us to have anxiety and overthink all the things that are going on in our lives. It's great that it allows us to do all the wonderful things that it does, but yes, it does allow us to contemplate these things and have that deeper conscious understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Now, it also has the ability for goal-directed behavior, in that we have hobbies. Like humans, we literally do things for the sole purpose of becoming better at something. No reason. There's no no benefit to our survival by any means. There's no benefit to, doing artwork in terms of, yeah, our survival or what have you, but we do it just so that we can get better and more effective at it because that brings us pleasure. Same thing with the gym, for example. Going to the gym, if we only operated on a stimulus response behavior, well, none of us would ever work out because the stimulus, the gym, is painful. And the logical response would be to say, screw that, I don't ever want to work out. But we're able to think in a future goal directed fashion and be like, yeah, you know what? The gym might be painful right now, but it's probably going to feel pretty good down the road. It's going to benefit my health. It's going to help me lose weight, yada, 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 yada. So we're able to have that more future perspective around that. And therefore, we go to the gym and do things that we don't like to do because we know there's a goal at the end. Some of the problems with these two brains, number one, the primal brain is very powerful. The old adage, biology always wins. This is 100% the case that if the primal brain is not getting its way and you are resisting it long enough, eventually it is going to find a way to get you to do what it's going to get you to do. Like if you hold your breath, eventually you will pass out and the primal brain will make you breathe again. So it's going to do what it needs to in order to make survival happen. It's often driven by emotions and not necessarily logic. It's constantly picking up and detecting our environment, trying to figure out what are threats, what is good, and that sort of thing. And it's more running based on, yeah, what feels good and what doesn't feel good versus this is going to be the smart thing to do. It also doesn't like change. Modern brain, on the other hand, well, it's lazy. So it creates habits, it tires very quickly, and it's supposed to keep the primal brain in check, or at least it tries to anyways. So what do I mean by the primal brain being powerful? Well, basically, it's a stubborn old man. Yes, that means survival is important, and it's going to make sure that's going to happen. But it can also backfire and be a bit of a pain in our ass in a lot of ways. So it'll always get the way that it wants. It eventually will happen, and it always needs to feel like it has control, or at least the illusion of control. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit here as we come up to it. And what we really want to focus on in terms of our primal brain, and part of the reason why we want to do this destination postcard, is that our emotions and behaviors, the more that we can get those things to align so that this behavior I'm doing feels good, it's taking precedence, it's important to me, the more likely you're going to engage in it, and the more likely your primal brain is going to say, okay, I'm okay experiencing this pain of working out. I'm okay being in a calorie deficit. I'm okay having the plate of broccoli instead of the fries. Whatever it is, it's going to have that better alignment and move us in the direction we want to go if there is a greater alignment between emotions and our behavior. The modern brain being lazy and tiring quickly, well, basically it's a teenager that's living on your couch right now. What I mean by it being lazy is that it creates habits, and anytime it can, it's going to give those habits to the primal brain to run, and then it's going to defer to the primal brain whenever the opportunity arises. So, if you had to remember how every time you got in your car to drive that said car, you'd be exhausted before you even got to your first destination. So your brain creates habits for a good thing, but sometimes it chunks together and creates the wrong habits that ultimately are maybe not the most effective for us in the long term. What I mean by it tiring quickly is this concept and this idea of cognitive capacity. So every morning you wake up, you can think of your brain having a certain amount of fuel, if you will. And that's going to be kind of our capacity for choices, willpower to choose the apple over the apple pie, to choose whether we go to the gym, to choose whether we go to work. So there's going to be these aspects and things that you make these choices around that ultimately are going to chew up that cognitive capacity. Now, stress, work, the kids, whatever, all of those other things are also going to chew up that cognitive capacity. And by the end of the day, you're not going to have much of that left over. Now, on to habits here. I always say there's no good and there's no bad habits. Every habit that you have solves a problem. It has solved some problem that you've experienced and encountered on a regular basis, and your brain has found the most efficient and most pleasurable way to solve that said problem. It has now created a habit out of it, and it discharges it or defers it to the primal brain to engage in automatically. So for example, emotional eating at night when you're, say, bored watching TV or something like that, your brain start thinking, I'm really bored. I want to do something. First time you went out to the kitchen, you kind of maybe rummaged around, then you found some chips or something like that, went and sat back down, and suddenly the brain was like, well, hey, this got rid of my boredom. And B, these chips taste really effing good. Like, this is pretty cool. Second night, you do the same thing. The brain starts going, hey, this is becoming a pattern. I really like this. We can do this on a regular basis. And if you do that enough times, and we don't know how many times it takes for that new habit to form or what have you, but if you do it enough, what ultimately ends up happening is, yeah, your brain creates a habit. So it's not even, you don't even think about it going and getting the chips or going and getting the snacks. You just do it, grab it, sit down on the couch, and suddenly you're eating out of boredom and not even knowing what you're really doing. But it's solving that problem of that emotional boredom that you're experiencing. So it's doing its job. It's just not the most effective habit. And ineffective habits tend to be the ones that, they're the most immediate and pleasurable in terms of reward sense. So the bag of chips, the candies, or whatever, getting a big payout right now, taking all your money. I think there was like that 25 years to life lottery thing at one point in time where you could either get a large lump sum of money or you could get $1,000 for a week every week for the next 25 years. Obviously, over the 25 years, you're going to get a hell of a lot more money than a large lump sum. But taking that large lump sum is going to be much more pleasurable right now than $1,000 every week over the next 25 years. But long term, likely not going to be your best decision. Same thing with our health choices and things that we choose. Having that apple pie is going to taste effing delicious right now, but having that apple pie every night for the next 20 years, probably not the best. Effective habits, unfortunately, there's a delayed reward and gratification. So again, waiting that 25 years to get all the money. Same thing with, we go to work for 2 weeks and we delay that time to get a paycheck, yet we work and we work through and we know that we're going to get the paycheck, but we still suffer through and not getting that immediate reward. So there's that delayed gratification piece of it. But these are ultimately going to be better for us in the long term. So that's always something to kind of keep in mind. The more pleasurable and intense a reward is or behavior is, more likely it is not good for your health in the long run. The more delayed it is, the longer you have to wait for it, probably the better it's going to be for you long term. So what are our goals when it comes to the two brains? First off, with the primal brain, we want to keep it happy. We want to keep that old stubborn man in good spirits, making sure that, they're comfortable, they're feeling safe, they're not getting cranky, all those wonderful things. And we want to maintain a balance, or what we call a homeostasis within the body. So that's going to be doing things like maintaining your optimal body temperature. So if you're cold, put on a jacket, etc. Adequate nutrition. If you're hungry or hangry, even worse, that's not a good thing. You are definitely at a point where your body is really dying for nutrients now and is going to be pushing you to go and find food. We want to provide it pleasure every once in a while. And that's why restriction of too much ultimately will backfire on us. So if you try and cut out chocolate altogether, even though you love chocolate, that's going to cause you to run into some problems. As well, doing things that you love, getting endorphins, exercising, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of managing the primal brain, this tends to be some easier and more tangible stuff because they're just more things that we can just implement and make happen around nutrition, activity, and stuff. And we'll get into that in a second. The modern brain, on the other hand, we're looking at trying to keep it engaged and create effective habits and increase that cognitive capacity. All the things that are there, from self-care to self-awareness to mindfulness, all that kind of stuff, this is all the stuff that is really hard to do. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes practice over and over and over again. And yeah, it's a challenge. It's a pain in the ass, to be quite honest. And so this is the stuff that isn't always the most enjoyable, but it's the stuff that we really need to do. So I'm going to touch mostly on the easier and tangible stuff tonight, but the other stuff is always something that we want to be keeping in mind and continuing to work through. And so should definitely be part of your weight management journey, whatever it is that you're ultimately working towards and trying to do with your life, because it is equally as important and it's going to help you to be successful in the long term too. So keeping the primal brain happy, there's three to four, depending on what we're talking about that day, but the three main ones are calories, protein, and eating consistently. So calories, this is our energy. This comes from our food. It comes from previously stored fat and glycogen within our body. The calories essentially is what gives us the ability to walk and do the things that we need to do throughout our day. Now, 100 calories of donuts is going to be equal to 100 calories of broccoli. Excuse me. A calorie is just a unit of measurement. Whatever is contained within that food is going to have different macronutrient concentrations or compositions, such as different amounts of fat, protein, that sort of thing. Okay. Same thing with minerals, salt, sugar, blah, blah, blah. Now, in order for weight loss to occur, it's not the carbs, it's not the fat. There's nothing special about any macronutrient composition or anything like that. To fundamentally lose weight, your calories that are going in, so the food energy you're taking in, has to be less than the calories that you're burning or consuming, your body's using for energy on a day-to-day basis. We really want to aim for this sweet spot where the energy intake that moves us towards our goals, so it might be weight loss, might be performance, might be just health, whatever, but also supports optimal health and functioning. And I cannot stress that enough. If you're not focused on the health aspect of things, the rest of it is ultimately going to break down. So that really needs to be our main priority. Now, I find there's generally two kinds of people. And the first kind that I tend to work with are the individuals that are eating too much. And within this, there's further two kinds of people. There's the people that are using the bazooka or people that are using the pellet gun, essentially to take themselves out or to ruin their calorie deficit. The bazooka is nicely illustrated in this picture here. They eat great Monday through Thursday, then Friday, they eat generally good. You know, they might go out for some drinks, have some beer, have some pizza, other foods, whatever. Saturday, they're not feeling well, a little hungover, late breakfast, larger breakfast, more drinks, more food in the evening, that sort of thing. And then Sunday, they get back on track. What ultimately occurs is that they may have created a calorie deficit on 5 days out of the week, but the 2 days that they have, they've essentially used a bazooka and have blown up the entire calorie deficit that they have created. And that ultimately means that their weight either continues to go up or it stays the same and they don't lose any weight. On the flip side, there's the people that use a pellet gun to essentially take out their calorie deficit. And this occurs for small, incremental, unaccounted calories. So this might be a thing like sugar in your coffee, salad dressings, not properly measuring how much you have going on there. It might also be like just a little bit extra of potatoes or a little bit extra of this side, or you know what, I worked hard today, I deserve to have this extra piece of chocolate. But if you continually do that and add in 80 to 100 calories every single day, and that's causing you to go 180 or 80 to 100 calories over your calorie amount that you're allotted to, again, your weight's either going to stay the same or slowly creep up. And for most people over life, there's a slow, steady creep of weight year after year after year. Christmas is a really classic example where we see a larger increase in weight over a shorter period of time, and then generally into the following year. A lot of people don't lose that weight and they continue to gain for the duration of the year at a much slower rate till Christmas again, gain a bunch of weight, and the pattern continues forward. On the flip side, I find there's the people that, they tend to eat too little. So they're not getting enough food in on a semi-regular basis. They're doing a too restrictive diet or what have you, and they've been dieting on and off for a number of years. Now, this is kind of the typical pattern of a yo-yo dieting that we see. As you can see here, right at this corner, we're going up to the very first diet that an individual's ever gone on. They decide to cut their calorie intake. Calories come down, weight in red here comes down as well. And so does their metabolic rate, or how much calories their bodies burns on a day-to-day basis. Now, this not only happens because they're physically smaller, but also because their body metabolically adapts and reduces how much it actually physically burns compared to someone that's at the same age, height, weight, and that sort of thing. And then what ultimately happens is that it likely was an unsustainable diet program or plan or what have you. They gain a whole bunch of weight back because they start going back to their old patterns of behavior and consuming more calories. And hey, they overshoot. They gain that extra 5 pounds. They lost 20, gained 25. And hey, their metabolic rate didn't quite get a chance to recover. It looks like it was starting to come back up, but then they said, hey, I need to lose weight again. They go on another diet, cut their calories even more severely. Yes, their weight does come down. Their metabolic rate, though, does fall even more. Again, it's not sustainable. Calorie intake then goes up again, weight shoots up, and hey, their metabolic rate is much lower than where they even started, even though their weight is higher than when they started. So This can be a pattern that happens over and over and over again. And what I often find is that the individuals that are consuming 1,200 calories a day, their metabolic rate is so greatly reduced, it could be anywhere from 200 to 500 calories lower than what it's supposed to be. And ultimately, we reach this situation where someone who has dieted on and off for years and years and years, they are the exact same height, age, and weight. They're female, but to maintain their weight, their calorie intake needs much lower than the individual that has never dieted, or even the individual that has only done one diet. So this is a problem that I often see, and this is why weight loss or weight gain can happen so easily. If you go off for like one weekend, they're going to be, this person over here that's dieted on and off for years and years and years is going to put on weight much more quickly because their calorie burn in a day is just going to be much lower than someone who's never dieted at all. So, I mean, what the hell do we do about all this? Well, the first thing that we want to start looking at in terms of how we can mitigate this, how we can start working through either of these problems that I kind of mentioned above, either too much or too little, is we need to collect some data. We need to see where we are at in terms of, are we at, what is the baseline level that we're at? And I always recommend, doing it over a 2-week period, being as honest as you possibly can with yourself. You can check out our website, healthcareevolved.ca. There you can get this sample journal template. It's a 7-day journal. You can use it over the 2-week period. Write down what it is you're eating, consuming throughout the day. Be honest about it, capture your feelings, and collect that data. And this isn't something to judgment or to say that you're doing something bad or wrong. This is just data. Data is exciting because data can mean that we can make more informed decisions. We can make more calculated choices to move us in the direction that we want to go. So data is fucking awesome. Now, I'm going to get into a couple of calculations here, and this is kind of a brief overview on it. I do have some other lectures that go into a little bit more detail. Of course, if you have any questions at the end here, please feel free to let me know. But the first thing we want to figure out, after we've collected that data, all right, how to figure out how much we're eating, how much calories we need, and that sort of thing. We need to look for our goal body weight. Now, goal body weight, I never say that this is the body weight you need to hit by any means. I've never really liked the aspect of this, and I haven't come up with a better name for it at this point in time. But to give you some perspective, your goal body weight is maybe a number that a weight that you would weighed previously and you were comfortable at it. It might be a weight that you feel that you can maintain quite easily. It's actually going to be sustainable for you. Or it's kind of the weight you can think about it as the weight that you would reach when you were at your absolute leanest. You might not actually ever get there per se or ever want to get there, but it might be the weight that you reach at that point in time. Now, sometimes we will call this your lean body mass. Essentially what we're looking for is, the weight that you're going to be at when you are at your absolute leanest and that sort of thing. Fundamentally, this is just a starting point. Again, it gives us direction to go into. It gives us direction to kind of start figuring out how many calories we should be eating, how much protein we should be eating. So it gives us that perspective. And it's an estimation. So there's going to be tweaks and modifications that we need to do as we go along. If you're overall not sure where to even start, pick a number, go for it. Pick one, start, and get the ball rolling. And adjust later. Once you figure out what your goal body weight is, you can figure out your calorie intake for weight loss. And it's goal body weight times by 12. You want your goal body weight to be in pounds, and that'll give you how many calories you should roughly be aiming for on a day-to-day basis. Now, not just aiming for, so if you come under, you think you're doing better. No, we want to try to be as close to this calorie amount as we possibly can. So if your goal body weight is 200 pounds, 200 times 12, 1,200 or 2,400 calories per day, so double of that 1,200 calories per day diet, is how much you should be aiming for in order to essentially lose weight. Now, I know a lot of you might be saying, well, this is too simple. This is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way. Or you might be saying that this is way too many fucking calories. Like a number of times I've had people tell me that. And probably for a lot of you, this is kind of thinking and causing some anxiety of like, I can't possibly eat that many calories. Anytime I've done or eaten more, the scale is going up and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to kind of unpack here. So just bear with me, if you will. Again, this is an estimation or a starting point, but more what we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate this metabolic adaptation. So again, this is coming from that slide over there. So say if that individual went on a diet, maybe this is their third, second diet, whatever, they cut their calorie intake, they lost a bunch of weight, as you can see in red here. And then instead of just going back to old habits and patterns of behaviors, they slowly increase their calorie intake over time. And this can be done over time. The evidence shows that you might even be able to do it overnight as well, to go from low calorie intake to a higher calorie intake. And overall, the weight regain is little to none. I would say this even is depicting more weight than what people will actually gain, but they're able to bring their metabolic rate back up, because what we have found is that it's not the weight loss that brings our metabolic rate down, it is the calorie deficit. So if we bring you out of the calorie deficit, we nourish and provide your body with the proper number of calories to keep that primal brain happy, that metabolic rate is going to come back up. And when that metabolic rate comes back up, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to not only lose more weight, but to also maintain whatever weight loss you achieve. So that is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring that calorie intake up to help reverse some of that metabolic rate and ultimately keep the weight off. As I said, the weight regain is very minimal, if any at all. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. But if you can consistently aim for whatever that goal body weight times 12 is, you do it for a month and you consistently stay within plus or minus 100 calories, depending on activity, other factors, and that sort of thing. Again, it's an estimation, but if you can aim around that, this will give you a good starting place to essentially be properly fueling, nourishing your body, and most importantly, keeping your primal brain happy so you don't have resulting binges or anything like that. Now, what about protein? This is the other big thing that we look at when we're trying to keep our primal brain happy. So protein, most versatile macronutrient. I always talk about how it's the king. It keeps you fuller for longer. It maintains our lean muscle mass. Like, the list goes on and off the benefits of protein. To calculate your protein intake, you take that goal body weight in pounds and you times it by 1. So goal body weight equals 200. Protein intake 200 times 1 equals 200 grams of protein per day. Now, second most common thing that people will say to me is, well, that's just so much protein. How can I possibly get that much protein in? Overall, it is a lot easier than what people realize. A lot of individuals just haven't taken the time and really made protein the main focus of their meals and snacks and sort of thing. But if you do that, if you go about and try to incorporate 20 to 30 grams of protein or even 50 grams of protein with each of your snacks and meals, it gets pretty easy to get up to that 200 grams or whatever amount of protein that you possibly need. The good news is, because a lot of people will say, it's hard on your kidneys, it's bad for you, blah, blah, blah. There's no evidence of this. There's no evidence that it causes any kind of harm or kidney issues. It's safe. And it's been shown to actually help with further weight loss and maintain your lean muscle tissue, which is basically the main component of your metabolic rate. And so we want to keep that as maintained as possible to maintain your current body composition. Same thing if you are a female at various life stages or such like that, you're going through menopause, maintaining that lean muscle tissue is so, so important. And finally, all of this is going to keep that primal brain happy. Now, eating consistently. So this is the third thing that we want to look at here. And we want to be continuously satiated throughout the day. So it's better to have fuel in the tank and feel a little bit of hunger than having points where you're starving altogether and ultimately leading to a binge or mindless eating. Part of the reason why we want to eat continuously is because we want to have protein pulses going in throughout the day. So as you can see here, when it comes to our protein, our body doesn't store protein. We get a pulse of protein. Protein reaches a certain saturation point. Whatever else we take in at this point in time just goes out in our gets stored or what have you. And then it falls. Again, we eat a meal, protein levels go up, it then falls. And this happens over the course of a day. And so we want to keep our protein intake continuous throughout the day with pulses, because we can't store protein. Our body can only make, it makes a lot of the amino acids, but not all of them. And so we need that extra protein. We need it consistently going into the system in order to essentially stimulate what's called muscle protein synthesis and to prevent muscle protein breakdown. So that's ultimately what we're doing. As well, again, we're keeping that primal brain happy. We're keeping your hunger managed. And this is kind of one of the main reasons why intermittent fasting, I find, just is not effective means for many people. So the final point here on the primal brain, happy primal brain, happy life. The happier primal brain is, the less cognitive capacity that you are going to consume. the easier it is going to be to make mindful choices, to choose the apple over the apple pie, and you're going to have to rely less on willpower and motivation to make things happen. Increasing your cognitive capacity. Another quick note here. Like I said, this is the crap that is all easier said than done, but it's still very important. It's things that you should be engaging in and working with a therapist or other people or working with our team, whatever it is, getting that support that you need to work through these things to increase that cognitive capacity. Some final points here for you guys. You really want to start small. As I said, you can go from the 1200 to that higher calorie amount overnight. And the weight regain, again, doesn't seem to be all that drastic by any means. So you can go about it in that regard, in that sense of things, but that's probably going to be pretty hard on your GI tract. Plus, your body is so used to eating so little that it's going to be hard to increase your calorie intake up there. So starting small by adding in 100 to 200 calories here and there, 30 to grams or whatever here and there, adding protein to your breakfast. Keep it small. Don't do it overnight. Make it easier on yourself. Get used to the process and that understanding of it and build your way up to where you want to go. Second thing, track your progress. Not only is our weight a lousy metric because we have zero control over it and it's going to fluctuate on a day-to-day basis. All of us coming off of Christmas holidays here, we all probably gained some weight, but we also all have likely started losing some weight now, which was largely water weight. So keeping that in mind that the weight is always going to fluctuate. There's always going to be different things that are going to go there, and tracking your progress and looking at behaviors is going to be more effective for you in the long term. As well, it's going to give us a bit of perspective when we look back on things because our memory is honestly shit. We can't remember, when we did good or that perspective aspect. We're always going to be thinking about what's the bad and, oh crap, I didn't do it that day versus you did it every other day kind of thing, right? You will focus on the bad instead of all the good things. Again, that's your primal brain trying to keep you safe, but it gets caught up on the wrong details versus, hey, look at all the fantastic work I have done over this 2-week period. I had a bad day yesterday, yeah, but overall I've done really, really well. So it gives you a bit more perspective. It also can tell us where we're failing, where things are breaking down, and what are the patterns and stuff like that that are going on so that we can look at how can we reevaluate and continue to progress forward with our goals. Finally, with goals, I just want to touch base on this. When you're creating your goals and looking at what you want to do, there's 2 general types of goals to look at. Number 1, there's behavior goals. So basically that's starting a certain behavior or avoiding a certain behavior, such as eating breakfast, adding protein to breakfast, or reducing how many times a week that you eat out, whatever it is. There's either avoidance or movement or move towards goals, that sort of thing. And then there's learning goals. A lot of people don't really take these into account. They think you should just kind of learn while you're doing the behaviors. But sometimes you don't have enough knowledge in an area. Sometimes you don't know what are good protein sources, what are good options or good exercises or whatever it is. We don't have enough knowledge in that area. So creating a learning goal to learn more about some aspect of thing that we're trying to change can ultimately make us more successful with our behavior goals because we get a better perspective as to what is going to be needed in order for me to make that change. So engaging in a learning goal and figuring out what are high protein breakfast options is ultimately going to help you to be a lot more successful than just trying to start having more protein in the morning and not really knowing what you're doing. So a learning goal before the behavior goal can also be very beneficial. When you make your goals, following the SMART acronym, I'm sure many of you have heard me talk about this, but specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So an example here, starting tomorrow, January 13th, I will start having breakfast 2 times a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I will be successful doing this by the end of 3 weeks. You can take that, you can modify it, change it, put whatever goal or behavior you ultimately want to put in there, but that is kind of the structure of an overall SMART goal. Final tips here. As I said, when it comes to our calories and protein, these are just estimations. They are going to need further refinement, but give them a solid 2 weeks at minimum. Month is better. See if it's working, what's happening, where are things going based on the metrics that you're using. Are you even able to do it consistently? Find a method of tracking that works for you, whether it's on your phone, a piece of paper, whatever it is, find a method that works. Tracking is so, so vitally important. And not necessarily just tracking calories, that can be good, but looking at the behavior aspects, making it a check mark, crossing off on a calendar, something in that regard. Again, increasing your calories might lead to some weight gain, But for many people, this isn't actually going to be fat gain. This can be more your muscles and body filling up with water and glycogen, because you've been so depleted for so long, your muscles are going to suck up that glycogen. And in particular, if you're adding an activity, it's going to suck up even more glycogen in order to prepare for the next workout and just having those nutrients available. So yes, the scale might go up. Yes, your clothes might fit a little bit tighter, but that is just water and glycogen filling in your muscles, and it's not actually true fat gain. All right. Now, again, if this is causing you anxiety, really we need to reevaluate again, looking at the power that we're giving our scale and the idea that, oh my God, I could gain some weight back. And you've worked so hard to keep the weight off. There's some deeper physiological and psychological aspects there that we need to dig out and really look at on a deeper scale before we even consider a weight loss goal. So something to think about. Finally, looking at hacking your environment whenever you can. How can I make this easier for my future self? How can I prepare my kitchen so that there's a better chance of me eating a healthy breakfast? How can I do whatever? How can I have this prepared? So always looking at how you can hack your environment. And then finally, the biggest thing here is consistency. I cannot stress this enough. If you don't do it consistently, you're ultimately not going to see the results. Aim for greater than 80% consistency. Less than that, you would likely still see some progress and results. They're just going to take a lot longer to come by. 80% is reasonable. It's something that many people can incorporate and do in their life. If you can do more, fantastic. You're never going to be 100%, but 80% gives you a good marker and a good life balance of seeing and making progress, but also still, having life happen. Final thoughts. Keep your primal brain happy, your modern brain engaged, so vitally important. Perfection, again, is impossible. Focus on the easy stuff to start and then build from there. If something seems too complicated, I guarantee it probably is. Failure is going to be part of your process, as cliche as that sounds. It definitely is always going to be a case in that regard. So learning to embrace and have that happen, that's awesome. That's, failure is a good thing. Just like collecting data is a good thing. They're just learning opportunities to how you can further optimize and keep progressing forward. And then having patience. This all takes time. It's taken you God knows how long to get where you're currently at and the weight that you're currently at. Having the patience to realize, yeah, it's going to take time for the weight to come off again and to change your behaviors and patterns. It isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen immediately. Learning to have that patience is going to be so beneficial in the long term. And finally, my favorite saying here, small tweaks lead to massive peaks. So always something to keep in mind. A few other resources here. The PN calculator, or precision nutrition, is what PN stands for. But if you want a more in-depth nutrition calculator / kind of a printout of, some ideas of what you should be eating and intaking and stuff like that, I recommend the precision nutrition calculator. And I generally recommend focusing on body composition versus just lose weight. The body composition one, I find, gives you a more accurate estimate of what you should actually be eating and how to break it down a little bit easier for yourself. Here's a couple articles on metabolic adaptation if you're more curious about kind of that reverse dieting and maintaining your metabolic rate as well. What protein sources, whether it be vegan, vegetarian, regular protein, how can you incorporate more protein in your day? So finally, we are going to wrap things up with some questions here. And just a quick thing here, I'm taking a break for February just because I am ridiculously busy right now and a number of people are wanting to work with me. So it's a good problem to have, but we're going to be doing another webinar in March where I'll be talking specifically about the various weight loss medications, the various classes of them, and give you the breakdown of all the stuff that you ultimately need to know and understand. And hopefully you guys can see us. The link for that will be going out here shortly, but you definitely can sign up and register. And I hope to see you guys there. It's another free event. So yeah, that's everything. I will stop sharing my screen now and bring on your questions. Sue, I hadn't realized you could undo that metabolic diet damage. Yes, for the longest time, we believed that you weren't able to undo the damage. We thought it was permanent and that was it. But what we're now proving is that it's not the weight loss itself. It's not that you damaged your metabolism. It's that it's the calorie deficit. And individuals that are struggling with their weight, they're constantly doing that cycle of gaining weight, going into a calorie deficit, gaining weight, going into a calorie deficit, and never truly getting their calorie intake up to that maintenance or higher level in order to correct that metabolic adaptation. So absolutely, this is where things are going. The medical community is a bit slow on its uptake. I think I'm one of the first clinicians that's kind of practicing in this regard in the sense of it. But yeah, it's super, super, super exciting. And I think this is going to be the future. It is more challenging. There's a lot of anxiety around it and such like that, but totally is a game changer and certainly can help you to kind of progress forward. Is weight loss affected by having a cholecystectomy? So having your gallbladder removed? Generally, no. I mean, there can be some digestion issues for some people in that regard, but for the most part, most people are perfectly fine with it and okay with it. There isn't any reason, there really isn't any reason to say it might be beneficial in terms of if we're looking at weight loss, because what we know is that if you have a drastic weight loss, that can ultimately lead to issues in that sense, in that regard of things. So it might not necessarily be the worst thing in the world, but it shouldn't inhibit your ability to lose weight or anything in that regard. Is that why the upping of calories to that times 12 is where we start? We can see with weight gain or loss, that calorie intake, how up and down our ability to burn is. To some degree. So, I mean, to figure out roughly what your maintenance calories is, like to say to maintain your body weight right now, if you were to take your current body weight in pounds and times it by 12, that would give you how many calories you need to eat to just maintain your current weight. So, for example, I'm about 200 pounds right now. To maintain my weight and not taking into account my activity levels or anything like that, really, to maintain it would be about 2,400 calories per day. And that would just to keep me there and whatever. That's what we're trying to get closer up to. But this upping it by the 12 to kind of your weight loss goal ultimately will get us closer to that. And what a lot of people find is that as they move their calories up there, they actually start seeing more weight loss. And it's because essentially you eat more to burn more, as kind of cliche as it is, and kind of some of that bro science kind of stuff is. There is some space to show that that is the case. And so that's getting that closer up to what our maintenance actually is. And for most people, it's getting you up there and getting to that point, but also probably still creating enough of a calorie deficit that you're going to see some weight loss on top of it. So it gets you up there. Some people are going to find they start dropping weight quite quickly. Some people are going to find they might need more tweaking. You might also, depending on how long you've been dieting up and down for years and years and years, you might need to go up even higher than that to your full on maintenance and maintain there for 2 weeks, a month, what have you, and then look at creating a calorie deficit to kind of reset things, if you will. So that's where that variability is going to come from. And yeah, then you're able to kind of get a better idea of where to change and where to go from there. So hopefully that answered that question, not too confusingly. Is it needed to do the exercise every day or every other day? So the amount of exercise that you want to do is whatever amount you can do, but that you honestly enjoy. The minimum that we talk about is 150 minutes per week, or about 30 minutes of some activity every single day. But if you're doing, 60 minutes every other day or something like that, that's okay too. Activity, some is good, more is better. Everything counts. So it depends on what overall is going to work and be best for you. But the more activity you can do, the better it's going to be for weight maintenance, not so much weight loss, but for weight maintenance for sure. We know that activity is a huge component of helping us to keep the weight off. Activity also provides us a dump of endorphins and dopamine. And generally, people who exercise are less likely to pull into the McDonald's drive-thru on the way home. They're more likely to go home and, make a chicken, broccoli, and whatever kind of thing, some kind of healthier, higher protein dish, because psychologically, it's like, hey, I just worked out. It's going to be more beneficial for me to go and eat that versus having a McDonald's burger and undoing that kind of thing. So those are all the benefits that come with activity. So you don't have to by any means. Start wherever you're going to start. Don't feel like you need to go again from 0 to 100. If you're not doing any activity now, starting with 1 day a week for 5 minutes, fantastic. I have some clients and patients that start with putting their shoes on and taking their shoes off. They do that 3 times a week, and then we get them walking, and then we get them here and we get them there. It's all about just engaging the habits and finding what ultimately works for you. Great questions, everybody. Awesome. Another question here. If you've been eating huge amount for 2 years without any dieting and gained a ton of weight, 75 pounds, would that mean at this moment that the metabolic weight loss damage from earlier in life is no longer active? Really, really tough to say. In fact, I would say it's probably impossible to say without having, say, indirect calorimetry. So that's actually where you kind of like will breathe into this tube and it'll actually measure what your overall metabolic rate is. There is some inaccuracy in those devices. It's difficult to fully pull that and get a perspective on that. So it's impossible to say. Maybe, maybe not. I would say more likely if you've gained a ton of weight and stuff like that and you haven't been dieting at all, if you were to punch in this 12 times your goal body weight, you're going to be much more likely to ultimately start losing weight on that calorie amount versus someone who has been dieting all their life and likely has that. So that is, yeah, so that kind of answers it. You can't really without kind of getting more of that science and data, but hopefully that provides you a bit of a perspective in that regard, I guess. Cool beans, everybody. As always, it is always a pleasure to jump on here. As I said, join us in March. And if you need any additional support or what have you, feel free to reach out to myself or my team, healthcareevolve.ca, or check out my email, Instagram, you name it. Shoot me your questions and I will be happy to answer them. Yeah, anything else, you just let me know. And this will all be uploaded, so you definitely can come back to it and check it all out. And yeah, feel free to tell your friends. And in March, we'll have another event. And I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your evening and rest of your week. Thank you very much. My pleasure. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. Awesome. Awesome as a possum. All right, everybody. We are going to sign off. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.